Hi folks, I'm Craig Taylor, and as always a huge thank you for joining me here on my YouTube channel, the Bushcraft Padawan. Regular viewers and subscribers may recall back in 2017 I set myself a challenge to spend one night out minimum a month for the entire year, and I did that from February through to January the following year. I managed to achieve and in some cases exceed that. In 2018 though, I want to do something a little different. Instead of going out for an overnighter once a month I want to spend a minimum of one entire day out in the woods. And my rationale for that is that when I'm doing an overnighter, most of the time that I'm out, I'm asleep. It's not great TV and it's not great for me to actually practice any skills other than sleeping outside, which I've already got that off to a pat. So I thought I'll spend a day out per month for an entire year. Gives me more time, more daylight hours to actually practice and develop my skills. So we're going to start today. Join me if you will. If you've been watching my overnighters throughout 2017 into 2018, you'll know that I always like to come out with something close to a plan. I always like to come out with some things that I want to try for the first time, or that I want to refine, or I want to practice, or that I have perhaps done many times before, but I just want to have another go at them, another attempt at them. And these old days are going to be no different to that. I've come out today with a plan in mind of things that I would like to try, or refine, or practice further, and they are, I've got it written down here. I want to service my tarp. The last time I was out I noticed some damage to one of the ridge lines, or the ridge line, so I want to repair that today and actually replace all of my tarp cordage. I want to make some, or practice making some very simple tent pegs. I did it when I first started bushcrafting, and then they kind of always took too long to do. So I used some very simple metal ones that I carried around with me. But I want to get better at making the natural tent pegs. So I'm going to have another go at that today. I want to scurry around for some cordage. There's a nice pine stand, I think it is, over there. And in fact, all three, apart from the one that's behind me, all three stands at this track junction I'm stood at have got masses of pine trees, so I want to have a look for some natural cordage amongst those. And I also want to fashion a very simple pot hanger for this afternoon and this evening's meal. So they're the things that I'd like to tick off. Who knows, other things may come up along the way, but let's start working through that list, shall we? Oh, and one last thing, I also today want to introduce you to a new member of the Bushcraft clan here at Taylor Towers. She's very young, she's only 6 months old. This is her first time out for a full day with her dad in the woods. So I'd like to introduce you to a new member of the family. And here she is. This is Willow. Willow is a 6-month-old golden retriever chocolate Labrador cross. We've had her now for about 4 months, I would say, since October of last year. We got her just as she was able to leave her mum. This is her first full day out in the woods. Well, I don't know why I'm talking to a stick now, she's wandered off. But this is her first full day out in the woods. She's been out many times with me in kind of woodland for a walk, for a bimble throw. But this will be the first time that we've spent an entire day, or almost an entire day, several hours out in the woods. So it's going to be an experience for me as much, I'm sure, as it is for her. Worst TV guest ever, worst YouTube guest ever. Here she is, she's back again, and she's gone again. Won't stand in front of the camera. Although she is now knocking the tripod by pulling a stick that seems to have got itself tangled up in the tripod legs. So I guess she's contributing to the video in some way, shape or form. But there she was, albeit very... Oh, you just saw a tail then? Come here, you bugger, come here. There we go. Look at the camera. Say hello to the viewers at home. Say hello. My God, you're soaking. I was dry until this point, and she's off again. That was Willow. I'm sure you'll see her in future videos. For the past several months, whenever I've been doing an overnighter, I've been sleeping in a debris shelter. I haven't been deploying my tarp at all. However, last month, so January 2018, I did put my shelter up. I did put my tarp up because it was absolutely siling it down with rain, and I wanted somewhere to sit and process the firewood and store the firewood, and my debris shelter was just too small. So I dug out my DD tarp. I can't remember what size it is. It's one of the larger tarps, 3x3 or 4x4. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this. What I noticed though was this. Hopefully you can see that there. What I noticed was that the ridge line, if you like, had started to perish, and this is paracord, and you can see that the outer sheath has gone and there's already some damage starting to take place to the inner sheath. Now for that particular overnighter, it wasn't the end of the world. I wasn't sleeping under it, I was only spending a few hours hunkering down under it while I was processing some firewood. Had I been sleeping under it though, I would have been more than a little worried that the whole thing was going to come down on my head because of the damage there. So I thought to myself, before I use this again in anger, for real, let's have a little bit of a service. Let's look at some of those ridge lines, some of those guy lines. Why don't I swap them all out and replace it? So that's what I'm going to spend the next few minutes doing, and it's also something I wanted to explain to you why I'm going to make a slight change in my guy lines and ridge lines and what the rationale for making that change is. As you've just seen, the ridge line and the tie-out points on my tarp are paracord. It's clearly failing, and I've also kind of realised that paracord's quite bulky for what it needs to do. Certainly the diameter paracord that I'm using, it seems overkill. So I've been looking round and I noticed that Hull Bushcraft, I have no affiliation to them whatsoever. I've purchased this, I've not been given it as a freebie or anything. They were marketing some tarp guy lines and tie-out points and ridge lines and so on and so forth, and I really like the thinking. They weren't just selling this stuff, they had some really good justification. It's much lower diameter than paracord, so it will take up less space, and less space is important because when I go out for a day and I take my tarp with me, I actually manage to pack the entire tarp down, and it is a big tarp, into one of the external pockets on my day sack. It takes a little bit of effort, but everything goes in there. It will take less effort if I've obviously got smaller diameter cord. So I've been looking at this cord here. It's I think it's nylon cord, or it's the opposite, whatever it is. It's got some incredibly high heat properties, so if I ever needed to use this for bow drill, I suspect it will be a better option than what I often do, which is to use paracord. It tends to have a higher melting point, this cord, apparently. So I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to swap it out today, and I'm going to give it a try on my next few days out. It doesn't have to be an overnighter to use a tarp, so I'm going to try it on my next few days out and see how I get on with it. But Jamie, big thank you for these, and thank you most of all for sending them out so quickly. I sent him a message mid-afternoon. Within a few minutes he had them in the post as I paid by PayPal. He kind of got them out to me super quick. So thank you ever so much for doing that, Jamie from Hull Bushcraft. Let's see how I get on with it. So it's relatively simple, although not particularly neat looking, to get a sharp point on one end of the tent peg. What I want to do at this end though, the end where my guy line, if you like, my tie-out point is going to go, I want to carve a notch into here. Now I don't know about you, but I've seen lots of examples of people using their knife to baton into this a third of the way in, and then to cut at an angle a groove to meet up with that, to create this notch that you can imagine a tent peg would have. However, for me that takes quite a bit of time to do. It's clearly putting wear and tear on your cutting edge of your knife. So what I want to try today is to achieve the same output, but to use what I think are better cutting tools that I'm carrying with me to bring that about. First thing I want to do is to completely obscure my shot with a Labrador. Off you go. Go on, get at it. I'm going to use my Barco Laplander saw, and I'm going to use that to cut into the actual tent peg itself about a third. There we go. Took seconds to do and placed almost nowhere whatsoever on the Barco Laplander. Now I want to use my axe to slice down into that groove that I've just cut, as opposed to using my knife itself. So I'm just going to get the dog out of the way. There she goes. And there we have it. That's what I was looking for. Nothing more complicated than that angle that we see there and the stop cut. Now for me that took far less time, placed far less wear and tear on my tools than using my knife to try and affect the entire thing. I imagine I could do all 4 tent pegs in the time that it would probably take me to do 1 tent peg if I were using a knife. So same output, just using, I think, the right tool for the job as opposed to always relying on the knife. There we have my 4 completed tent pegs. I have to say, now that I've got an axe, which I didn't have in the early days when I used to come out and was doing everything with a knife, now that I've got an axe, now that I'm becoming more confident and more proficient with it, I have to say I think I'm going to resort to doing this every time I go. It does take a few extra minutes than using metal tent pegs out of my bag, but as you've seen there, using an axe to carve those notches where the guy lines would go, where the tie out points would go, much quicker than using a knife, and far more quicker using an axe to carve the actual points. So I think that's going to be part of my repertoire moving forward. I'm very mindful that I bring a lot of man-made resources into the woods with me. I'm mindful that some of those are very obvious, like a tarp or an axe or a knife, and some of them are almost so in the background, if you like, that you kind of don't realise that they're there. And one of those is cordage. You saw me earlier on in this video using meters and meters and meters of cordage without a care in the world. That's a man-made resource. So what I want to try and get better at is being able to source and harvest and find that type of resource or something that can be used for cordage much better. And as I'm in a beautiful, beautiful pine forest today, I thought to myself, why don't I fashion myself a digging stick? It's basically a stick with a wedge shape carved into the end. And why don't I try and dust off some of the cobwebs that may linger from the elementary bushcraft course that I did with Paul Kirtley and his team back in April of last year, almost a year ago. They showed us how to go into woodland such as this and how to look for cordage. And that's what I'm going to spend the next few minutes doing, trying to refresh myself on how to find and harvest and process that cordage. Okay, so as I was exposing that, I've actually snapped it. Go on, get out of the way, leave it alone. There's the end of it I had been working on, as modelled by Willow. But actually what I've discovered here is a much thicker, more stable, you can't take them anywhere, can you? There's a much more stable route here, so I'm going to try and follow that along and expose it. It's much thicker, hopefully it will stand up to my somewhat amateur archaeology a little better. What's this? What's this? Find it. I've got a few roots here to show you. You can see, I hope, the various thickness of each of them, or the varying thickness of them, should I say. And what I was always quite amazed by when I did this the first time back on the course is just how flexible these damn things are. Look at that, that's relatively thick. That's as thick as one of my fingers without a doubt. And then you can see the flexibility. I'm not going to pull that. Oh, there you go. That would be plenty enough to be able to lash a piece of wood against another piece of wood. For fine, delicate stuff, you're clearly going to need to use a thinner piece of root system. But there we go. Natural cordage in the ground beneath our feet. And we've got some slightly thinner pieces. Here's the thinnest piece that I've got here. I don't think I'd be wanting to risk the shelter above my head with this, but you can see, again, the flexibility of that piece of root system there. Quite time intensive, I must admit. Shouldn't have taken as long as it did though, just for those 3 pieces. And the reason it took so long is because I was getting some help from the dog, from Willow. She decided she wanted to get in on the game, and why wouldn't she? She's a dog, and I was digging in the mud. Completely normal for her to want to get involved. Unfortunately, she ripped through all of the decent roots and tore through the finer ones, so she did her best, but definitely one I think in the future to keep her tied up to a tree somewhere whilst I'm looking for cordage, because she doesn't help matters at all, but she did have fun. Sit, sit. Find it, go on. Yeah, splendid. We reached the end of another day, and we reach, of course, the end of the first of my all days that I'm planning to do throughout 2018. 1 day minimum every month throughout the rest of the year. So let's have a look at the things that I wanted to cover off. I wanted to service my tarp and replace the guy lines and the ridge lines and all the rest of that. That's done. Got that out of the way. Happy with the setup. It's the same setup. I'm just happier with the cordage that's on there than what was on there previously. Tent pegs. Got the tent pegs done, no worries. I'm using 2 of those tent pegs at the moment on the setup that I've got. And I must admit, I've always been put off doing them in the past because they seem to take so long. My knife sharpening still isn't on the ball, so there's an aspect of that in terms of get out. I'm trying to have my tea and she's just finished hers, so she clearly thinks she's on to her seconds. Mine. So the knife sharpening on the tent pegs, I found that using an axe much quicker, much cleaner, far more confident doing that, and of course it improves my axe handling all the time, so I'm going to do that more in the future. You've seen that I've made my tea this evening and somebody else's, which they've wolfed down. There she is. Oh, we've got you in camera shot at last, have we? Nice. I made a simple pot hanger for that, very, very simple. And what else was I looking to? Oh, the cordage as well, of course. You've seen me looking for some cordage. I must admit, I think that would have been far easier had I not been getting the canine assistance that I was getting. So I've enjoyed today out in the woods. It's been really good. It's been pleasing to get things done at less of a frantic pace. Clearly there is a time and a place for a frantic pace, but I don't really want that to be all the time that I'm in the woods. So I think this notion of coming out in the morning, spending the day, still intending to cover off 3 to 5 things, but being able to do them at a more measured, more considered, more leisurely pace makes for an all-round better experience. If today is anything to go by compared to some of the more recent overnighters, particularly in the winter months. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. If you think there's someone in your network that would value from it, then feel free to share it. If you want to comment below, either on YouTube or Facebook, about anything that you've seen, would you have done anything different? Was there anything there where you thought, oh, that was a good idea, I'd not thought of that? Anything and everything. If you've got some sort of feedback, please do leave it in the comments below. And as always, if you're not yet a subscriber, then please do click on the logo in this corner of the screen, and you'll instantly become a subscriber, and you'll be able to keep up to date on all of my future comings and goings, and her future comings and goings as well. Thanks ever so much for joining us today, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.